Jai Prabhuji. Welcome everyone to another lecture in our Retroprogressive Institute in the subject of Prabhuji's video lecture commentaries. And today I wanted to expand a little on a subject we mentioned in our previous meeting when commenting on the lecture God is not a solution, and didn't have time to speak about it in the flow of the lecture. And it will be slightly different because the knowledge that we will discuss and bring up here is from the years of being a disciple of Prabhuji and the talks we had and still have with him about spiritual life, religion, about the path, and so on, together with insights into Prabhuji's writings. So one of the subjects we didn't speak on is religious life versus spiritual life. Just to refresh our memory, I mentioned at the start of the previous lecture that people find themselves being managed by life rather than managing their own. And then they turn towards the search of spiritual or religious life, which are not the same thing. And I would like to say in advance that this can be a sensitive subject, so we will tread on it carefully because by no means it is meant or intended to offend anyone, but understanding the difference and being informed is a key point in the spiritual life, as we mentioned in the previous lecture. If you remember, we said at the end of the last lecture that this subject we deal with and all that Prabhuji is talking about in his lectures and books and all the spiritual knowledge is about and meant for self-exploration only. Now, changes and or advancement on the path can only occur when you know exactly where you are. Prabhuji always used to say, if you want to go to New York City, to Manhattan, the first thing you need to know is where you are at the moment, so you will know which direction you have to take. Maybe you are already in New York City. And it is not different in the spiritual life. This is also the reason why you go to a spiritual master, to an enlightened being, so he will help you by pointing out those places we don't want and cannot see. He shows us where we are situated. Only then changes can occur. And if a change didn't happen or happened partially, as people like to say, it means that we don't see or don't see fully. And as challenging as it can get, it's a little on the black and white side. You see, you change. You don't see, no change or partial adjustments. And the subject of religion versus spirituality is one of those subjects that by knowing where we are situated or located can help us advance on the path. What am I practicing? Why am I practicing? What do I want from my practice or by practicing? And I will bring a ridiculous example, so just to emphasize the importance of the seeing where we're at. So it's like I have this habit of putting my hand in the fire, and it hurts and burns and hot, and it's uncomfortable, and I drink a lot of water and try to fight the heat, and I remove article of clothing to ease the discomfort, and I blame the heat of the sun that caused the pain, and I put all types of cream on my skin, and as we like to say, no matter what I do, I always get burnt, hurt, etc. And then someone comes and says, hey, why do you keep on putting your hand in the fire? Don't you see that you keep on getting burnt by this habit? And suddenly you become aware of this fact. And the natural thing is, oh, wow, yes. And I take my hand out of the fire. And by becoming aware of this pattern I have, everything else that is related to it in the way of behavioral aspects automatically stops. When you truly become aware of something, it's like magic almost. You become free of it, as if someone took scissors and cut all your ties to that pattern. And you think of it no more. It's quite remarkable change. It's quite remarkable, actually. Now, change comes out of awareness, out of seeing, and by becoming aware, we develop. We develop when we get familiar with the seeker. Not that the seeker will be enlightened. No, we mentioned it in the previous lecture as well. I am the problem, and I need not be. And here we have what is seemingly a paradox, that the more I know me, the less me I become. There is more room for existence to manifest. So why is it? If we pay attention to who we think that we are or who we consider ourselves to be, it's only assumptions, suggestions, ideas, thought we have about who we are or who we should be. It's what we were told about ourselves, what we were led to believe, that we are this body-mind complex. This is how the ego is built, created. But seriously, nothing tangible. Try to search for you. Where are you? This person you think you are. And the way we were taught is that we need to be someone. We need to have personality distinct from everyone else to stand out. We were told you need to become your own person. And the identification with the persona and the adding of titles and thoughts about ourselves and so on doesn't leave room for existence to manifest through us. And come to think of it, the word person originates from ancient Latin and Greek. The meaning of the word persona was originally referred to the theatrical mask. Latin etymologists explain that persona comes from per sonar, as the mask through which per resonates the voice of the actor, and that and what we think that we are, the egoic phenomenon, is exactly that. It's sort of a mask that by our identification with it, we think it is us. And we develop a personality. This egoic phenomenon that if we look and check it carefully doesn't really exist. It's held together by this egoic identification with the I idea. And the different yogic paths deal with exactly that, the different ways to realize we do not exist, that our egoic existence is temporal, while there is something else that is eternal. Hatha Yoga, we are not the body. Raja Yoga, we are not the mind. Karma Yoga, we are not the doer. Bhakti Yoga, we are not our emotion. We are not the center, the divine is. And so on. What doesn't exist? This person I believe myself to be. If I go back to the awareness and seeing, or as we said a moment ago, this is why we go to an enlightened master that will help us see. Because a lot of what we do is make excuses why we do what we do, why we keep on getting burnt again and again. All kind of stories and excuses, everything except of looking at the truth that I keep on putting my hand in the fire. And why? One of the reasons is that I still get something from that situation. And no matter how horrific the situation may be, it's the known, it's the familiar, and I get something from it, even if it is only the fact that it's the familiar. And changes are scary. The unknown is terrifying. So it keeps my egoic phenomenon in existence. Now, another reason is that it's very related to it, and we mentioned it in the last lecture, Knowledge and awareness are obligating. It means I need to take full responsibility over my life. Now, in the book The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, who was a German Christian monk that lived between the 14th and 15th century, and he oversaw instructing novices in the monastic life. And this book was created, or he wrote, out of that role that he had. It's an amazing book that Prabhuji introduced to us many years ago. And in those days, he recommended that we should concentrate on book 1, which is the first 10 chapters, because it can teach a lot about the right attitude of a spiritual seeker. And it's really an amazing book that till this day, every so often, I listen to the narration of it. And in this book, in book 1, chapter 2, part 3, it says, "The greater and more complete thy knowledge, the more severely shalt thou be judged, unless thou hast lived holily. Therefore, be not lifted up by any skill or knowledge that thou hast, but rather fear concerning the knowledge which is given to thee." Which say exactly that. Awareness and knowledge are obligating. Now, another reason is, in a way, it's an acknowledgement that the situation is a result of karma from my previous life, manifesting in this life, and to accept it, to learn from it, and so on. Okay, so far this was more sort of an introduction to the subject and connecting it to the previous lecture we had. And Prabhuji said in the past that a spiritual person will always be religious, but a religious person not always be spiritual. True religion and spirituality are not different. But religion, or as Prabhuji called it, religiosity or institutionalized religion, is different. In his book, Experimenting with the Truth, Prabhuji answers a question he was asked about religion and spirituality. And at the start of the answer, Prabhuji writes, "I wish to clarify that I do not criticize religion, but institutionalized religion. There is only one true religion, while institutionalized religion has many faces because it is social and non-spiritual. There are many religious isms as cultures, templeism, churchism, synagogism, and so on." So here we have a distinct separation between religion and institutionalized religion. True religion, spirituality, unites. Religiosity, organized religion, separates, creates fragmentation in the person itself and in communities. Because it is a social issue, as Prabhuji mentioned in his answer. This may be a good time to clarify the word religion. If you listen to Prabhuji's lectures and read in his books, you probably came across the explanation of the word religion. It comes from Latin, from the word religare, which ligare means to bind or connect, and the prefix re means to reconnect. And that tells us a lot about what religion is or is supposed to be. Like we mentioned in the previous lectures, religion is not about looking for something external out of us. It is connecting to our true nature. Now we see ourselves as this body, this egoic phenomenon we identify with, and that keeps us disconnected from who we really are and from others. And as we mentioned in the previous lecture, it is a subjective issue. We are looking for a true nature, true self, the one that is not fragmented, but unified, the one that is not different from existent or God, call it what you may. So, as we progress in this talk, I think we already brought up subject or aspect that differentiate between true religion or spirituality and religiosity. One of them we just mentioned a moment ago, the unification versus the fragmentation. Now, another difference that is connected to this issue is that religiosity gives clear answers and creates a purpose or reward for why to do this or that, and a punishment if you don't do this or that. And the one who has the answers has the power. That's when religions become a tool for controlling the masses. And there is no better way than division. Now, Prabhuji writes further. Throughout history, these isms have paralyzed followers' faculty of thought and promoted blind fanatism. Cheap religiosity has for centuries proclaimed to have the answer to all the questions. It has lacked the humility to accept and revere life's mystery. It does not have enough honesty to publicly admit that not all our questions can be answered. So here we have the issue of knowing or not knowing and facing the unknown. The great masters, the seers of the truth, no matter where and when, spoke about one God, that we all one, that behind all these worlds of names and form there is one reality, that we are not who we believe ourselves to be, etc., etc. However, whoever doesn't see gets confused, and since it seems unattainable, we start asking questions. But questions come from a mind that can only ask about what it knows, what it already sees. There is no way a mind will be able to invent or create anything that is outside of it, that the mind in one way or another wasn't exposed to it or already have it in it. But the enlightened master, throughout the generation, speak about subject and experiences that are beyond the mind, that the mind cannot even comprehend. And not only that, because we are the mind, and as we mentioned, this is a subjective problem. I will never be enlightened, me, I. So true masters, the enlightened being, answered to the best way they could to try and explain the unexplainable, giving different examples and explanation to try and fulfill this need of the mind to know, to control. Because this is only what it is, the mind needs to control. Prabhuji said once that all the masters' talks and writings is their frustration in trying to explain the unexplainable. The masters never had an issue with not knowing, with only being. The mind has a problem, a serious problem with not knowing. Because if we are told, don't think, just be, it takes about a second for the mind to come up with all kind of questions and excuses why we cannot just be. Because if we will observe ourselves in a moment of just being, full awareness, no mind, fear comes up. The fear of death. Why? Because as we mentioned many times before, I, me, the mind, this egoic phenomenon is nothing more than wrong identification. It doesn't really exist. It's different functions that are connected by one thought, one identification, the I idea. That's it. And when that is threatened, the fear of death comes up. So masters describe what they see, and that has no name. So institutionalized religions answers what they never saw. And the one who has the answer, as we said a moment ago, has the power. So suddenly that has a name and an address and wants and needs an agenda, and it looks this way or another, and so on and so on. Organized religion is born out of fear and the psychological need to find meaning and explanation for life's experiences. It offers an escape from confusion. It explains the incomprehensible and approaches the unattainable. Prabhuji continues and writes, religions belong to the enlightened master, while organized religion belong to preachers, priests, rabbis, pandits, imams, and the modern satsangists. Authentic religion has flourished in people like Jesus, Buddha, Moses, Muhammad, Shankara, Krishna, Chaitanya, Lao Tse, and Guru Nanak. Jesus didn't know about Christianity, Catholicism, or Protestantism. Moses never heard of the term Judaism. Buddha never imagined that he would become the founder of Buddhism. I can tell you from personal experience that when I became a disciple of Prabhuji, the aim was to become enlightened. So all our questions were about how to question, how to become enlightened, what practice is the best, how can I advance in my meditation, and so forth. And every time, without fail, no matter what spiritual discipline we would practice, Prabhuji would always tell us, I give you sādhanā, which is the spiritual practice, but this is not what is going to make you enlightened. It is not something that you can do or create. The only thing you can do is to create the right conditions for that to happen. But whether it will happen to you in this lifetime or not is not up to you. If existence needs you, it will make you enlightened. So from the beginning, it's a process of renouncing all our wants and desires, no matter how spiritual they may seem, and creating space, as we mentioned, to become less me. And here there is another point that is connected to the issue of knowledge, the knowing and not knowing, and asking questions. In the yogic path, we have the jnana yoga path, in which we inquire and ask questions. And it is a process of what we call neti-neti, not this, not that. We spoke about it in one of my previous lectures. So asking question is a very important part of the spiritual path. So we can start differentiate between things, because we cannot know what is, only be it. So we can at least know what it is not, and by process of elimination, eventually clear a space. The disciple is encouraged to ask questions, and in time learns to ask the right questions as well. We had many talks with Prabhuji over the years about this issue of asking questions. And in his answers, Prabhuji always made it very clear that the question is more important than the answer. An answer that the mind can capture is okay. It calms the mind down, but there is a process that happens when you keep on asking questions. The master teaches you how to ask better and better questions, how to refine your questions, how to fully be in the question. And the answer many times will come up in a form of another question that is even more refined, and the answers will unveil themselves. And the more the disciple gets in tune with the guru, until the disciple becomes a question, and then there is only silence. Prabhuji writes in regards to isms, by condemning any attempt to question their dogmas, these isms have extinguished believers' ability to investigate and examine. They keep their adherent on the surface by using all kinds of ruses, such as doubt is a spiritual weakness, thinking is pointless, and investigating is unnecessary. Throughout history, these isms have paralyzed followers' faculty of thought and promoted blind fanatism. They have convinced them that seeking is futile and have kept them ignorant about themselves. Now, as an egoic phenomenon that gets a sādhanā or a practice and supposed to practice it regardless of the result, and for the ego, it is very difficult to act or to do without getting anything in return, or to do without even knowing what the result will be, if there will be one. One of the reasons is the identification with the doer, the I. So the result of what I do say something about me, how people see me, how successful I will be considered, and so on and so on. And it is always going towards the outside, out there. So we become attached to the result of our actions, and the spiritual business has a way to start blooming. And Prabhuji writes, true religion has always reacted against pseudo-spiritual businesses that lease made-up gods and sell us imaginary plots of land for the afterlife. Something like a paradise real estate agency. So this is one aspect of the issue of getting a result or getting something out of your spiritual practice and so on. But there is another point of view in this regard, and that is the subject of what is really the spiritual work all about. And here we turn back again to the Ishavasya Upanishad. And just to remind everyone, the lecture of Prabhuji, God is not a solution, that we are commenting on, and mentioned it in the previous lecture. Prabhuji was referring to, in the lecture, he was using one of the verses of the Ishavasya Upanishad. It was Mantra 6. And now we are turning to the same book of Prabhuji, Ishavasya Upanishad, commentaries commented by Prabhuji. But we are going all the way to Mantra 15. And the mantra say, Hiran mayena patrena, satyasyam pita mukam, tatvam pushan apavrinu, satya dharmaya drishtaye. The face of the truth in its dazzling splendor is covered by a golden disc. O sun, please remove the disc and show yourself to this seeker of truth. And Prabhuji writes in his commentary on this verse. However, the divine path is egoic suicide, since it directly attacks the foundations of who we believe ourselves to be. It threatens the very basis of our egoic construction. The path to the truth will always be destructive because it aims to kill falsehood. The authentic path differ from the spiritual business that is sold at the fair of mundane mysticism. The former comes from the enlightened being who educated disciples, the latter from hucksters who serves customers who are always right. The Sufi expression, to die before you die, may seem somewhat paradoxical. Rumi writes in his famous Mashavi-ye Manavi, "O blessed are those who die before they die, for they have sniffed the perfume of this orchard's origin." In fact, this allegory refers to the extinction of our conditioned identity. It is a voluntary death prior to physical death. This is what also Saul of Taurus referred to in Epistle of the Galatians 2:20. "And I no longer live, but Christ lives in me." And Prabhuji here brings Thomas à Kempis. We mentioned him and his book at the start of the lecture. And Prabhuji writes, Thomas of Kempis, in his famous book Imitation of Christ, 2:12 alludes to this mystical death. Be assured of this, that you must live a dying life, and the more completely you die to yourself, the more you begin to live for God. And in this commentary on this verse, Prabhuji brings many more examples from different scriptures, from different traditions, that all talk about the same thing. The spiritual path is a destructive one. But not only that. Prabhuji keeps on developing the commentary on this mantra, and it is absolutely amazing. I really recommend this book. This incredible. It's unfortunate that I don't have the time to read all what was written there in Mantra 15. So I will summarize some aspects of it and will show some of what Prabhuji wrote. So the seeker is asking for the experience of the light to be removed so he can experience the truth. And Prabhuji writes, the more the mind remains absent from our process of observation, the greater the luminosity. The splendor increases in direct proportion to the depth we are blessed with in meditation. A deeper level of consciousness, our challenges will be very different. Darkness is a beginner's problem. For advanced seekers, it is light. In the beginning, the problem is twilight. In the end, it is blinding light. And why is that? The seeker knows that as long as there is an experience, there is a duality, the light and the observer of the light. No matter how subtle the eye experience is, as long as there is a duality, the ego, subtle, spiritual, whatever, but it is still there. And it is one of the most difficult places to let go of. It's easier to renounce to suffering, but to such an experience, it's much more difficult. Prabhuji keeps explaining that seekers can be stuck for many incarnations in this level of subtle dualism. So the seeker is asking to be rid of the magnificent experience so the truth in full can be revealed, which in turns mean no I, the death of the ego. And in relation to what we spoke about before, you, the egoic phenomenon, will get nothing out of this. But in the institutionalized religion, we are promised heaven. In one of his audio lectures, Prabhuji says about this subject, the spiritual practice with time becomes a means to get that something, the unattainable. It became a currency one buys a bungalow in heaven. And by becoming a currency, it obstructs the path of people to the truth, to reality, to real religion or spirituality. Okay, so I think we spoke about quite a few things that can give us enough material to ponder and contemplate over, to examine where we are and where we want to be. And even though we spoke about some things that can be interpreted as this against that, remember what we said, and we will keep on saying. It is all about me, not them, not how they practice. And whether this, that, or the other is practicing real religion or religiosity. What matters in all this is me. Where am I in all this? Where in my attitude I can still find something from the isms? Where in my meditation or service I'm still waiting for a reward? Why do I do what I do? Have I managed to let go of all the dreams and ideas I had about enlightenment? And many more. Remember what we have been saying. All the knowledge and practice and all the spiritual books we read about all the yoga path and all the yoga we practice and so on are for one thing and one thing only: self-realization. So Prabhuji ended his answer with the following: maybe one of these nights you will raise your questions to the sky, and the blinking stars will embrace you with their deafening and lively silence. Such silent shouting from the depth of existence will eclipse your enigmas. Perhaps only then shall you feel a caress of truth. Thank you, and Jai Prabhuji.